Oh, thank you. 40-year-old. What do you think?
Gorgeous.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to welcome you here to the Tasting Room Monte Carlo. We're here for two reasons. First of all, we're here to open this beautiful venue in the middle of the most prestigious place in the world. And we welcome Sam Simmons from the Balvenie, who's kindly taken time out of his huge schedule to come over and open this room for us. Sam, thank you so much. You're one of our good friends. He's been already to visit us for the Monte Carlo Whisky Conference last year, and this is a great honour that you're here. Thank you, Sam, very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. We'll give him And the second thing that we're doing tonight is we are launching the Monte Carlo Whisky Conference 2015. This is now an annual event. It's quite new for Monte Carlo, and the support that we've had from Scotland, from all of you, from all the experts, from Prince Albert himself, it's just immense, and a great responsibility now to do justice to the industry and to Scotland, to Monaco also. So welcome tonight. I hand you over to Sam. Sam, cheers.
Cheers.
God bless you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Sorry. And slime. Cheers.
I just forgot to explain the format. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to taste 3 whiskies, first of all, in the tasting room. And then we're going to go over to the Hermitage to relax with a cigar, get something to eat, and then 2 of the rarest whiskies that we're going to taste. So, enjoy these.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're right. So we're tasting 3 different whiskeys here, and then 2 very special whiskeys. And as the gentleman you already pointed out, we're having whiskeys that get older, go in order, sort of chronological order. That's true, but also they increase in rarity. So the first thing, so as a global ambassador for a Scotch whiskey, family-owned Scotch whiskey brand, the first thing you might notice is my accent. I'm obviously from Aberdeen. Aberdeen, Ontario, Canada. And so I grew up in Toronto, in Canada. And I moved to Scotland in 2002 where I didn't know anybody. And so, like a good Canadian, I joined a hockey team and I joined a drinking team. And the hockey team ended up being field hockey. So that was not, I was looking for ice hockey, that was the wrong thing. And the drinking team, which I referred to it lovingly as, was actually called the Edinburgh University Water of Life Society. And it was a bunch of people sitting around with their pinkies up, going, oh yes, oh apricot, oh indeed, yeah. And they were a bit poncy, but there was one person there who started telling me about whiskey, and I got into it. So similarly, like the journey you're on now, wanting to get into it, that's what I was like 12 years ago. I didn't like whiskey. I stole some from my grandfather years earlier, and I thought it was disgusting. How could someone drink that? But then I learned to like it. I was in Scotland. I was a bit older, obviously, and I wasn't really into drinking, but there was some of the flavor and the history and the diversity. You look around this room, there's here, even in this small space, there's easily 50 distilleries represented. There's 106 single malt Scotch whiskey distilleries operating in Scotland, and just so we're all on the same page, when someone says single malt Scotch whiskey you can make in Japan, and Taiwan, and Canada, and anywhere in the world. In France, which they do up in the north quite a bit, whiskey just means distilled beer. So our friends from Munich, we took the beer recipe and we perfected it by distilling. And distilling is just raising the temperature of something, separating the alcohol from the water, redistilling and having a more concentrated drink. That's all whiskey is. If it's spelled with an E-Y, then it's Irish or American. And if it's spelled like that, it's everywhere else in the world. That's the only real distinction. Scotch whiskey then is distilled beer from Scotland. So Japanese whiskey is distilled beer from Japan. So that second last word is always important. It tells you something about the provenance of the drink. Malt Japanese whiskey or malt Scotch whiskey in this case. Malt is the barley, the grain that we use. And malting is a short way of saying malted barley. Saying malt like that is a short way of saying malted barley. And malting is something you have to do to the grain to be able to make it into beer and then into alcohol. And thus, civilization is born. Whiskey. Distilled beer from Scotland, made of malted barley and single. Any guess what that means?
Not married.
Not married, that's good. Not tonight, I'm not.
It's from one cask.
From one, not cask, that'd be single barrel.
All right.
One distillery. Right, so that's not.
One
First
distillery.
question.
So if you look around this room, all of these whiskeys are single malt Scotch whiskeys. Downmore is one distillery. Glenmorangie, single malt from just one distillery. Bowmore, Lefroy, Bruichladdich, Ardbeg, Kilchoman, Balstall's drinks. Single malts are very singular. As you'll see, the whiskeys we're having tonight, they all taste different. They're just from one distillery, but they all taste different. And the fun thing that got me into whiskey years ago was that all these whiskeys taste different. That's cool. It's like wine. It's like someone saying, "What kind of wine do you like?" "Oh, I like red." There's two choices. If that's the way you see the world, what kind of wine do you like is, well, red or white. But obviously it's much more complex than that. So with Scotch whiskey, it's infinitely more complex. It is the most complex spirit in the world, just for having so many different sources from one tiny little country. So, distilled beer from Scotland made of malted barley. When it comes off the still, it's water white. And I'm telling you all this because it's going to help us understand and appreciate the whiskeys we're going to have. That it's totally clear. Vodka clear when it comes off the still. So all of the color and as much as 70% of the flavor come from the barrels. Those wooden casks that you see, yeah. So the first time we put whiskey into barrels, we call it a first fill. And we typically use barrels that used to hold something else, either American oak, so barrels that used to hold bourbon, or European oak, barrels that used to hold sherry. That's the tradition that's developed over time. It's changed obviously over time with phylloxera and bugs in France that changed the need for sherry or the availability of port and other things. But if you put Scotch whiskey into a barrel that used to hold bourbon, American oak that used to hold bourbon, that's the color you get. And the type of flavors you get are coconut and sweet big vanilla flavors and brown sugar and really lovely things you expect from bourbon, that sweetness. If you put it in European oak or sherry casks, you get the darkness from the wood itself, from the sherry as well, and you get a different array of aromas altogether. So you get cloves and raisins and dried fruits and maple syrup maybe, but that's maybe my Canadian bias, but still.
Because of the wood.
All from the wood. And Scotch whiskey, resourceful people, I won't say cheap, but the Scots, whiskey making grew out of a farming agricultural tradition. So reusing the grains to feed your animals, reusing the water, reusing the heat was always some of it. We also reuse the barrels. So that's an American oak barrel that's already been used once for 12 years to hold mature spirit. They would have taken the whiskey out, sold it, or made it Balvenie Doublewood, and then filled it again for 12 years. And it gives a slightly lighter color and a different array of aromas as well.
So colorblind.
Well, so that's green and that's red.
It's colorblind.
That's good. It's a good thing for whiskey drinking. It's great to be colorblind. To judge with your eyes is just completely unfair. It's all about the smell and taste. So I have to tell you that to give you a background because all Balvenies and all whiskeys in this room will be matured in a similar way in barrels of American oak or European oak, generally. And all of the color and as much as 70% of the flavor come from the barrels. Okay, and David Stewart, who's our malt master, he's the lucky guy who puts his nose in every barrel in the warehouse and makes our whiskeys. He's been with us for over 50 years, the longest serving malt master in the Scotch whiskey industry. He pioneered this method of finishing, which you hear a lot about in whiskey. That's maturing whiskey in one type of barrel and then another. So taking it out of that first barrel and then putting it into a port barrel or a Madeira barrel or a Sauternes cask or something like this to give it extra flavor. So double wood means that. It means that it's a whiskey that's been matured in 2 barrels in succession. First, an American oak barrel, giving it that vanilla straw-like color, the vanilla flavor, gorse, and coconut, and a nice brown sugar sweetness. And then after 12 years, we take it out and put that same whiskey, that mature whiskey, into a barrel that used to hold sherry, where it gets that darker color and an extra layer of aromas and flavor. So it's quite a complex whiskey for just being 12 years old, I think. So when we taste, like the method, like with wine, you want to look at the color because, like I said, the color is telling you what type of barrel the whiskey matured in. It's dark-ish, so we can assume some sherry. So then you have a small sip. I'm assuming it's your first drink of the day. But you just have a tiny, maybe that's an assumption, you've been on the beach all day, just really a pinky fingernail amount, a tiny amount. And then it's actually worth having a bigger sip if you want, but it's strong. It's 40% alcohol.
It doesn't
So
feel like that.
it does. It is a gorgeous dram. It's one of the world's favorite whiskeys for that reason, because it's easy and approachable. But when you're tasting whiskey, it is wise. It is wise to cut the whiskey. It's called adding a bit of water, which you'll see mixing with the spirit in there, and that actually it's going to change the temperature. It's going to change the chemical construction so that actually volatiles will fly off, and you'll be able to smell, because alcohol is inhibiting a lot of the flavor and aroma. So I added too much water actually. But anyway, usually if you add just a drop, it awakens the spirit a little bit, and you can smell and taste more than you may have done a moment ago, where it's like spirit. And also, if you're not used to drinking spirit this strong, it's nice to add a bit of water because that's easier to sip. The most we'll reuse the barrel is probably 5 times, and most of the whiskeys that we would drink as a single malt are probably 2 or 3 times. Because a lot of the whiskey we make goes for blending as well. And where you're mixing different casks together, it's okay for them to not be too woody, because you're mixing the flavors. So I would say, yeah, the most usage we get, like a tea bag. Unless you're based in Scotland, what's in the way is getting that wood to where you live. So if you want to make everyone I meet around the world, oh yeah, I'll take the barrels, how am I going to get them to California? And by the time I get them there, you'll be selling the cherry you made for $3,000. So that's the challenge. But so yeah, we can't use them. So we have a huge graveyard. We've experimented at our distillery. Balvenie is one of the last distilleries that still is a traditional distillery, that we grow our own barley and malt our own barley and a traditional floor maltings. And we've used the wood, we've chopped up the wood to burn. So we've used that, used it in that way as well, to see if it works. So do we like that?
I love it. I really love it.
We'll go to the second whiskey, and like double wood, it's matured in 1 barrel, and you see the color, it's got this pink-red hue.
Yeah.
Wow.
So one major difference, so it's the same idea, they're both double wood, 1 barrel and then another, but instead of sherry, it's port, and instead of only 12 years, it's 21 years. So
It's a little bit darker, isn't it?
it's a different kind of dark. Yeah, I guess it is actually dark.
Yeah.
There is a distinction that's important to make between drinking and tasting, because when you're drinking, the primary objective is pleasure. So you want to put Coca-Cola in it, or ice, or water, fine. But when you're tasting, obviously it's pleasure as well, but it's also appreciation. So to appreciate it, it's best to have it naked, or natural, or neat, or whatever, as it comes. Well,
Later.
so I've never shared this with people in the tasting.
Never?
Never, because this is only available in the airports and boats. This is a travel retail exclusive. This isn't something we promote with samples. But
Can I
I thought,
ask you something?
yeah. So it's precious stuff. It's very rare to have
This
whiskeys
is,
mature this long that you can supply.
Not as hard as the second one.
Yeah.
25-year-old.
Oh, it's the
Cheers.
slam.
I just got on those again. Next, oh, it's a different animal.
Matches.
It's venison, isn't it?
The reindeer.
Reindeer. Sorry, yes.
Big.
Are you tasting this?
Yeah.
This is stronger than before. It's 41 years.
Just a little bit of this with you.